Hello there, many thanks for staying with us. Welcome to People, Politics and Power. Again, we return to an issue that has dominated the news for so long: insecurity in Nigeria. 333 students are said to be missing after an attack on government science secondary school, Kankara, a town in Nigeria's northwestern state of KATSINA. This is according to the state governor, Aminu Masari. Gunmen on motorcycles reportedly stormed the all-boys boarding school late last Friday and engaged the few security agents present in a fierce gun battle, forcing hundreds of students to flee and hide in the surrounding bushes. This brazen attack took place just as President Muhammadu Buhari was settling down to a one-week private visit to his hometown of Daura. Now, a delegation led by the Minister of Defense visited the state over the weekend and promised to rescue all the children. This incident comes about 2 weeks after the ZAMBARMARI massacre, where 43 farmers were killed on rice farms by terrorists. For many, the Kankara incident is a reminder of two major abductions in the past involving school children: the DAPCHI incident and the CHIBOK girls kidnap, where to date over 100 girls remain in captivity, including, of course, Leah Sharibu, who was taken from DAPCHI. Following the Kankara attack, parents of the missing children took to the streets in protest, demanding that government steps up to rescue the missing students. On social media, the hashtag #BringBackOurBoys is trending in solidarity with the families of these children. While the news of the abduction dominated the media space, the police in Oyo State confirmed the kidnapping of two foreigners. The abduction of the Indian nationals adds to a growing list of abductions, foreigners and Nigerians alike, in a nation where kidnapping for ransom has become a commonplace. Many questions arise. How did the attackers of the Kankara school do it? Recall that the CHIBOK incident happened when the movement of the children in vehicles. So how did the attackers in the Kankara case move the children? As reports say, they stormed the community in motorbikes. What was the response of the security agencies? First, in preventing the incident, and second, to make it difficult for the bandits to move these children. About 333, as we are told now, all of them moved from Kankara into the forest or wherever they were taken to on motorbikes. As security experts know, the first 24 hours in every abduction is the most critical. So what steps did the security agencies take from a tactical perspective in that time frame? Now, we cannot tell for now the intention of the attack, but could it be an affront on Mr. President, who is in the state at this time, or just an uncanny coincidence? Are the bandits looking to recruit more soldiers for their criminal enterprise? Or do they have a grievance with the state government, which had earlier on negotiated a deal with them? Now, following the attack, boarding schools have been shut down in Katsina State. Now, what are the long-term implications of this incident? What has happened to the Safe School initiative, which was created as a response to the Boko Haram terrorism, and why it has not been implemented so effectively across all schools in the region, especially a state like Katsina State, which has become a hotbed of banditry. Now, all of these recurring incidents lend credence to global statistics showing the severity of the situation in Nigeria, amongst which is a fragile states index of 2020, with Nigeria ranking number 14 and number 3 in the global terrorism index. What is the way out of the security crisis that Nigeria is facing? This is the focus of our conversation on the program today. When we return, we shall meet our guest analysts, both here in the studio and those who are joining us virtually. And we will be looking at the Kankara abduction incident and what that means for education, particularly so the Safe Schools Initiative program that has been in place for several years now. How effective it has been and what all of this means for the security situation in Nigeria. Stay with us. All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Let's begin with our guest who is physically here in the studio, Mr. Leonard Anyongo. Mr. Anyongo is a public affairs analyst and a member of the Chatham House. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Anyongo.
It's my honor. Good afternoon.
All right, we're also joined virtually now via Zoom by Kabiru Adamu. Mr. Kabiru Adamu is a security consultant. Thank you so much for finding time to join us, Mr. Adamu.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Also joining us is Mr. Ferdinand Ikwang. Mr. Ikwang is a security specialist. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ikwang. We're also joined by an education specialist, Damian Mary Adeleke Adewale. She is a programs officer, Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All, SACEFA.
Thank you, Joseph, for having me.
Great. Welcome. All right. So let me begin with Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Mr. Adamu, let's begin this way. This is the third major abduction of school children from their schools since 2010, when all of these crises, security crises, actually began in Nigeria. What does this tell us?
In simple terms, that as a people, we have failed to provide protection for a very critical component of our society, that is schools. And, to emphasize this point, the government signed the Safe School Declaration in 2019. That declaration is an international political movement that is meant to provide protection for students and schools, teachers, anyone within the school community. Now, since 2019, unfortunately, the government has not put in place adequate protection or even a framework for implementation of this declaration. And I want to be very clear, when I use the term government, I am not necessarily speaking about the federal government or even the executive government alone. Speaking generally, the three arms of government, the federal, the state government, and to an extent, the community, the local government levels. I know this may sound laughable because for the average Nigerian, it is the federal government that we look up to. But as it were, this responsibility lies on all of us. And unfortunately, we have been unable to provide that responsibility despite signing this agreement and despite, like you mentioned in your introduction, the existence of the Safe School Initiative.
Now, if you look at this particular incident, for 333 children to be taken away all at the same time, in fact, the Chibok school girls incident was 276. This is a much larger figure than either DAPCHI or Chibok. How is that possible?
I mean, the account that I had that is most reliable is from one of the students that escaped the abduction. He said they came back to the hostel at about 9 p.m. and the attackers came to the school and they had the gunshots. So they ran away and jumped the fence of the school. But then the attackers shone their flashlights on them and invited them over. And because they were wearing security uniforms, they assumed they were actually security personnel. So they gathered. Now, the interesting thing, and that's why I'm bringing this account, he said when they herded them into the forest in the dark of the night, they asked one of them, the eldest one among them, to count. And at the end of the count, he counted 520 of them. So going by that account, of one of the victims, 520 of them were herded into the forest. But the truth of it is a lot of them escaped. And that is why the governor now mentioned that about 330 or 334 are currently unaccounted for. Now, how could that have happened? Number one, it happened in the dark of the night. Number two, the fact that there is no security works in concentric cycles. Sometimes you don't really have to provide direct security on a location. You can have concentric cycles, and then as you get closer to that location, it makes it very difficult for whoever carries out the action to escape. In this instance, I haven't done an assessment of the school, so I don't know if they have a fence around the school. Now, even if they have a fence, we saw what happened in the Turkish school, and I think it was in Ogun State, where they bore a hole into the fence of the school and then escaped with the pupils that they escaped with in that incident. Now, even if they had a fence, what was the integrity of that fence? Was the integrity as such that students could not jump over it, or that the assailants could not bore a hole over it? And then what kind of rapid response mechanism was in place in the school? Was there a communication facility that they could call the nearest security post? And then what was the capacity and capability of that nearest security post? In this instance, we are told it took about 4 hours for the military to arrive that location. So, without going into the details, there are so many gaps that went wrong, given the fact that KATSINA has been a vulnerable location for banditry as well as terrorist attacks. So it was inconceivable that you would have that type of situation where students will be in a school without adequate protection, and then, of course, given the number of them that were taken away has happened. It's really inconceivable at the moment.
All right, Mr. Adam, please stay with us. I want to take off from the point at which you stopped and see if Mr. Dr. Ferdinand Ikwang is with us now. If he's with us, let's explore the security aspect further. Now, this is a state, and I'm talking of KATSINA State now, that has been a hotbed of banditry for some time now. And at a stage, the state government actually went into negotiation, into a deal with these bandits. And one would have thought that with that kind of experience, KATSINA State should be experiencing a lot more peace than it is at the moment. And against the backdrop of the fact that this is the state of the president itself, do you think that there's possibly something went wrong between the bandits and the state government? Are the bandits trying to send a particular message to the state government in this instance?
Thank you, Amara, and good afternoon. I don't think it's a KATSINA State issue. I think there's a wider issue. And when it comes to negotiating with bandits, you're doing that at your own risk. Because negotiate with one group, and there are 20 groups. That means you have to negotiate with 20 groups. There are policies that says you should not negotiate with bandits. And whenever you start negotiations with bandits, you have to have an exit strategy for that negotiation. If you say, come out, I'll give you this, drop your weapons, you have to have something, either a disarmament program that exits them into giving them something to replace what they are using. Because if you pay them money and they finish using the money, they're going to come back for more. But in any case, it is the responsibility of the governor to provide security and welfare for his people, as well as primary responsibility of the president. But the immediate person on the ground is the governor. And it is in his purview to do everything that is necessary to keep his states safe, first of all, before we move to the federal level. And I don't think it is the right thing to do an open-ended negotiation with bandits. If you want to negotiate, you should negotiate from a position of strength. And I feel that Zamfara State and Katsina State have been negotiating, but they are not negotiating from a position of strength. Kaduna State did the same thing at some point, but I still say when there's the recurrence of banditry or violence or so, then you were not negotiating from a position of strength. I give an example of how the Niger Delta own was done. The government and the president at that time insisted that we must be negotiating from a position of strength and not from a position of weakness. That anybody that does anything after the negotiation should be severely dealt with. And now I see Kaduna, I see Katsina and Zamfara state governors taking the initiative and negotiating with bandits. But after the negotiation, what next? Do you follow through with any program that makes sure that these people will not come back? And I don't really want to add anything to what Kabiru said because he's already explained a lot about the Safe School initiative. We still go back to what we say all the time, accountability. When something goes wrong, who do we hold accountable? In recent times, we've been shouting President Buhari. But if you look at it in the hands of the National Assembly, it's not in the hands of the president. The president can do whatever the law says he should do. But it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to check the powers of the president, to check whatever the president does. The Constitution is very clear. It says that good governance is in the hands of the National Assembly. So who should we hold accountable when something goes wrong? The Safe School Initiative was signed. Now that there's a problem, who do we hold accountable? There should be some form of accountability. If there is banditry attack, whose AOR, whose area of responsibility is that? That person should be held accountable. And if you say the military responded 4 hours, well, I wouldn't put any blame on the military. I'll just say, maybe you don't know about the logistics. We need to know about the logistics. We need to know about the terrain. And we need to know about the response. But in any case, who do we hold accountable? That's the most important thing. That the president is in Katsina State. I don't know whether we want to play politics with that, but that it is the state of the president. It's been happening before he went there. It's still happening while he's there. So he's not a decider. The decider should be that we have a nationwide security architecture that works. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, let's see how that develops. We'll come back to you. But at this point, let's talk to Mr. Adewale, who is of Sakefa. He's a program officer with Sakefa. Mr. Adewale, I'm particular about the Safe Schools initiative. This was meant to keep schools, particularly schools that are in rural areas, safe from such attacks. We had it in Chibok, we had it in DAPCHI, we had it even somewhere, even a police academy was at one time also invaded in Yobe State. And a number of police cadets were also taken at that time. And up until the time we're speaking now, not much has been said about it. Now, what has happened to the Safe School initiative?
Okay, thank you very much. The Safe School initiative, from the beginning, I wouldn't say much about it because the fact remains that we kept, or the government of Nigeria kept using education as a bait. When the Safe School initiative came on board, all of us lauded it. The Civil Society Action Coalition, Education for All, and other CSOs working on education issues lauded the efforts. But to our own very dismay, that the initiative was set up, it is supposed to have been seen that by now, issues around adoption of children shouldn't be coming on. Like you just outlined, from the Chibok girl, from even within the cadet and others, children had continually been adopted. Now, with this Safe School initiative, one would have expected that the government would have put in place all the necessary measures all the necessary mechanisms, all the necessary, security apparatus that should be around on how these children should be protected. You cannot tell me that with this situation where we have banditry everywhere and still kidnapping, children will be in dormitory with the safe school initiative that has been signed or declaration that has been made, and nobody is sending security to guide these schools. We had expected that the federal government, the state government, the local government, even the communities at this point should have taken schools very importantly by sending security personnel to protect children in schools. But what we keep saying is the opposite of it, because these children, when like the narrative that has been coming out from these children, they saw them in security uniform, and so they got to believe that yes, these people are from either from the military or from the police. Well, the government has a lot to do. We are saying that keeping these children safe is of paramount importance to the government, to the community. Yes, security is the responsibility of all, but you and I don't have the instrument of protection. We can have only the instrument, the resources of intelligence gathering and all that, but the government has the instrument, the government has the weapons, the government has the power to protect the children and to deploy all the necessary personnel to that place. So it is not good that at this point, government is still paying lip service to education. These children that have been adopted now, the CHIBOK children, the DAPCHI children, the psychological effect that is still in them has not gone out of them. Yet we are having another set of children being adopted. So the whole scenario is playing to the fact that our government at all levels is not taking education serious. And by the time they start taking education seriously, then they will start making the necessary provisions. It is not just to write on paper. It is not just to come out and make fun fair. Like somebody said, using education for politics. It is high time we stopped all these things and then be serious with the lives of our children. We have future presidents there. We have future pilots there. We have children who are going to make this country proud tomorrow. How will they grow up? So government need to start taking security serious. So the state school initiative that was declared, government has to go back again and sit down and start calling people and start holding people to account for responsibility. Who is supposed to guide them? What are the indicators that we are supposed to be measuring? All these things have to be put in place. Otherwise, we will not have any concrete headway into protecting our children from school.
I'd like to ask a question that Mr. Adamu asked earlier on. Who is to be held responsible in this particular case?
In this particular case, the government has to be held responsible. Like I said, children are in the dormitory, and we have security challenges. These are not just children who come in the day and go back. And we have security issues around the country, especially in the northern part of the country, where these challenges is high. The government should be held responsible.
When you say government, which government are you referring to here? Are you referring to the state government, the local government, or indeed the Ministry of Education in that state?
Well, the Ministry of Education will have no much power to deploy security. The state government, if you ask the state governor, he will tell you that yes, he's the chief security officer, but he doesn't have the power to deploy military personnel. He doesn't have the power to deploy police. But the police and the army and especially the federal government should be held responsible for this, because for every part or for every security challenge that we have witnessed in one place or the other, and when you ask the governor tells you that they have to take instruction from the up. So if the federal government knows that, yes, because we are not actually running a true federalism, yes, education is in the concurrent list, but security is not in the concurrent list. So we should face the fact and tell the federal government, concentrate and protect these children. Whether they are in secondary schools, whether they are in primary school, the federal government, the first responsibility of the government is protection of life and property. And the life of our children, their fundamental human rights is paramount here. So the federal government should take the brunt of all this. Why we keep, because at the local government level, it is still what they said, what they direct them to do, that they do. So they don't have the power of their own. So if the DPO is there and is not giving instruction to this particular school has to be protected, then the PPO will not do anything because they are waiting for instructions or order from their bosses. So the order should the AIG or the AIG and the Chief of Army Staff should be called to book. They should be held responsible for whatever issue that is happening with this security in schools, because they are part of stakeholders that provides protection for children and every Nigerian anywhere they are, especially our students in school. So the federal government, the AIG, the defense headquarters should be held responsible for this.
All right, stay with us. Mr. Yego, let me come to you. You have had the benefit of listening to other contributors on this program. The first question one would ask is, why are our schools so vulnerable, particularly in the northern part of the country? It happened in Borno, it happened in DAPCHI in Yobe State. Now it has happened in Katsina State, Kankara in Katsina State. We have seen one or two similar incidents in other parts of the country at one time or the other. What do you think is the objective, the aim of these groups in attacking schools?
Well, I've been known to be one person that have been engaged or be calling for what we call community policing over the years. Both in my local, national, and international engagement, I've always called for community policing because security, like we all know, is a collective responsibility. It starts with gathering of information, intelligence gathering, before, and of course, that leads to being proactive in nature. Look at the areas of attacks that keeps occurring. A very serious-minded security outfit like Nigeria as an entity will know that these are the angle of these security challenges that would need to be proactive. Schools have been attacked. Our children are continuously being captured, being dehumanized. You now know that, look, if you have a boarding school, especially in the northern part of the country, I mean, you should be very proactive. I think the key element that are proactive is the Nigerian state towards security architecture. Incidentally, in 2005, while I was doing my national youth service, I served in Katsina, so I know the terrain very well. I used to go to court cases across the local government, even up to Dara, where the president comes from. So I know the terrain. Then the community could volunteer, even as a core member then, could tell you that, look, this area is not good, don't go to this area. You know what I mean? So it's all about community policing. So how proactive have we been? We have not. And then there's another key element that I've been known to say that laws without implementation of the sanctioning aspect, it's not even a mere musical instrument. We have laws, sufficient laws in this country that people that are indulging in criminality will tend to, rather than punish them, will tend to encourage them. Look, I'm one of those very, very sad persons to see my friend, I call him my friend, the governor of Katsina State, negotiating, I mean, with bandits, terrorists, giving them money. Just like one of the panelists has said, when this money gets exhausted, they will always come back for it. We do not have deterrence, absolutely none. I've not seen, in my legal practice, I've not seen where terrorists have been successfully prosecuted. And so when you take that aspect of law, the sanctioning aspect of law, it shows that it's a lawless society. And with the greatest respect, governance exists for the security of lives and property before welfare. Where there is absolute insecurity as we have to, nothing absolutely will work. It's not just a Katsina issue, it's a national issue. Even in my state, Cross River State, there's a kidnapping and the governor has to launch what we call Operation Akpaku. So it is just a national psyche. We have a situation where the security, with the greatest respect, our security men have been overstretched. And this is time for government to look inward and call for a national security summit. You look, what are we not doing right? Look, I'm not a prophet of doom, but I won't be surprised if another set of students are still being, will still be kidnapped, because the trajectory is there, and we are not proactive. Look, it's saddening to know that you take over 500 students away. It's not just going to be 1 minute, 2 minutes, 1 hour. So what is the response time from the community to the local police and the security network? I mean, for God's sake, the president is, as at that time that incident happened, the president is in Katsina State. So we don't respond to these security challenges, and we are not proactive. If we are proactive, we'll be able to nip this thing at the bud. Look, I did the research. I was in the research panel at the Chatham House in terms of the way we in this continent, Africa, look at security. What we've discovered is that there's no engagement with the community. We just leave everything for the security man with the uniform. He does not have information. Even when there's a fear that when the local man, they look at citizen volunteer information, the security man will not see him as the first suspect. So there's that disconnect between the citizens and the government, between the citizens and the security agencies. It's supposed to be a collaborative effort, which we don't have. The question is that we are rather being more reactive than being proactive. So I think this is the time to stop playing politics. I keep saying that we must know that where politics end, governance must begin. We tend to play politics with everything plus security. There's no distinction between where politics will end and governance will begin. And in other climes, it's not like that. Whether you are APC, you are PDP, you are from any party, once you are elected or you are appointed in office, what you should do there is governance and no longer politics. Right from when someone is appointed or elected, he's thinking about how to sustain or remain in office, rather than delivering this the dictate of the office. So until we become very proactive in our approach, engage the community, and by sourcing information, with the greatest respect, I think there's zero intelligence gathering. Rather, we wait for us to be attacked and then we react. The community has to be engaged. The community, citizens have to be engaged. Citizens must earn the trust of the security agents that when I report and say, look, there have been this kind of movement, suspicious movement, we should take those citizens into protection and give them that kind of confidence building. Because, look, when that massive attack is something that I can just, I'm just foreseeing myself in KATSINA because I've been there, I was there. I know that it's an open land. I mean, people don't just come in that way. So there's no synergy. Of course, another issue that was raised is that they came with military uniform. I mean, you now know that who is a real military officer, who is not. So there's a complete disconnect. And so there's a need for security and a state of emergency on our security network.
All right, Mr. Adamu, let's take it up from there. Let's begin to hazard some guesses. As of today, no group has claimed responsibility for this. Unlike in the DAPCHI case, unlike in the CHIBOK case, no group has claimed responsibility. But all we know from the accounts we have heard is that these bandits, well, we choose to call them bandits for now, came in uniforms and conducted these abductions for several hours and took these children away. First, let's understand, are these bandits or are these terrorists? Is this another arm of the Boko Haram? What is the objective? What is the possible objective for this abduction?
Thank you, Mark. The indication based on statements that I've heard from both locals and from the government, both the federal and state government, is that these are bandits. And then what is their objective? It's likely to be financial, criminal. But these are all speculations where we wait for them to make a demand, which they are likely to do. And then, of course, it will be confirmed or not. However, and I think this is very important, the issue has now become an issue of national discourse as well as international. Yesterday, it was all over most of the major international media houses. So the likelihood that terrorist groups that have active cells in the Northwest would want to take over the negotiation is very, very high. And the longer we delay in the rescue, the higher this possibility remains. As at yesterday, we were told by the Minister of Defense that they were domiciled in one of the forest reserves close to Kankara. Now, we know that bandits have their hideouts in that forest. So again, it corroborates the fact that these are likely to be bandits. And at this moment, I think that's what we're looking at. And if you permit me, I want to quickly comment on the question you asked regarding accountability. I disagree a little bit with my fellow discussant when he said it should be the federal government. No, I am of the opinion that it should be the Ministry of Education. They are the custodians of our children. And I want them to do exactly what the Ministry of Health is doing. When COVID-19 came, the Ministry of Health considered our vulnerabilities. In risk assessment, you look at the threats, you look at the risk, you look at the vulnerabilities. In this instance, I expect the Ministry of Education to do that. First off, have an audit framework. Have a website where you can post an audit framework that every principal, every school administrator can use to conduct an audit of his school. Then the second thing, have a template for an assessment that every principal, every school administrator can conduct an assessment, a security assessment. And then lastly, what are the recommendations for basic security that you can have? Have these 3 templates, and then it will now be the responsibility of the school administrators at all levels to now ensure they have all of these things in place. And frankly, I'm volunteering myself, and I'm sure a lot of other security professionals can volunteer to assist the Ministry of Education in developing these templates that I mentioned, the audit template, the assessment template, and then the security, physical security template. Once they do this, then they would absorb themselves. It will now be left for the security agencies to now provide the kind of security. But if you go today, if you go to the website of Homeland Security in the US, all of these templates that I'm talking about are there. If you go to the, for instance, the equivalent of NEMA, I think it's FEMA that is called in the US, they have this type of templates. Now, this is the way to go. When my co-discussant was talking about engagement, these are how you engage the public. You don't just engage the public with word of mouth. You engage them by providing these templates and then encouraging them to install the type of necessary arrangement. With our security personnel, we can't deploy security to all the schools in the country, but we can have these concentric cycles, including these templates that I mentioned. So I'm hoping that the Minister of Education is listening to this and he takes advantage of this. Have these templates on your website and then have an implementation framework that will assist schools to develop security in their physical locations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ferdinand Nkwang, let's come back to you very quickly. One would have thought that after Chibok, after DAPCHI, that we would have learned some lessons, but it appears we have learned no lessons at all. For this to happen again, all over again, 6 years after Chibok and 2 or 3 years after DAPCHI, this for a lot of people is very embarrassing. Now, what do you consider to be the way forward here? The Minister of Defense said on Sunday that in a few hours, these children will be rescued because they have intelligence as to where they are located. But this is over 24 hours after that pronouncement. Nothing seems to have happened. We do not have any new information as to the location of these children.
Well, thank you. I don't think we've learned our lessons, and I don't even think that we are going to learn in a short run. We won't. We will continue to talk. We will continue to be available if they need people to assist. But if they do not, they will have to continue doing this politics, mixing politics with governance, and it never works. The kind of statements that some of the handlers of the Mr. President make, they just make statements. I remember when it happened in DAPCHI, one of the handlers said that there were 100, the Air Force has deployed 100 aircraft. You can't fly 8 aircraft at the same time. You're talking about flying 100 when we don't even have up to that. And now somebody's saying in a few hours. What is a few hours? Empathize first. Empathize with the people. That's the most important thing, first of all. And we need to move away from, when something happens, we say the government. Who is the government? When we say the federal government, sometimes, look, I have read the Constitution, and I have seen that the powers of the governors are even stronger than those of the federal government. The governor, I mean, his primary responsibility is security and welfare of the people. And the president's primary responsibility is security and welfare. But you know, the president may, as the Constitution says, deploy the military, but within 7 days of doing that, it has to go to the National Assembly to seek approval. So any military officer you see out there doing a job without approval from the president is on illegal duty. So sometimes we need to start looking for the people who are in charge. When we say Ministry of Education, yes, when you go to the Ministry of Education, they go into that statement. I've read that in the ministry itself. There is concurrently security in this, security in that. The state governor is in charge of the state, first of all. And there is no conflict in the Constitution at all. It even says that where there is any other law is in conflict with the Constitution, the Constitution takes precedent. And the Constitution hands over the entire state to the governor and not to the president. It is the responsibility of the governor to secure his state. He has a state security council. He should secure the state. Now, this state security council is made up of all the agencies, including all the armed forces, the Navy, Air Force, Army, they are all there. The DSS, they are all there. If he requires security in any location, it is the responsibility of the governor to make that request, and that request will be honored by the president. Then we can now say, yes, the president has honored your request. But in a situation where there is a total disconnect between what is happening on the ground and what is happening at the federal level. Now, I'll give you a typical example. When the 43 farmers were attacked, the president said that he has given everything to the military for them to be able to do their jobs. I am one of those who would defend the Chief of Army Staff. But at the Chief of Army Staff conference, the Chief of Army Staff said that he wants to thank the president, that he has given him everything to do his job. Now, who should we hold responsible? Is it the president or the military? Now, let's go back to what has been happening. We are talking about the secondary schools that abductions have happened. Are we forgetting that it has happened also in the universities, and even lecturers and people were taken and killed? So the lessons ought not to be learned now. The lessons ought to have been learned when the first one happened in Chibok. It was all over the news, all over the world. We should have learned our lessons before the DAPCHI. And when DAPCHI happened, that was the beginning of this administration. We should have learned our lessons then. And then the universities were also attacked, and we didn't learn the lesson. And then we are trying to learn the lesson at this time. Now we have arrived here. Let us say this will be the last time that this will happen.
We pray and hope so, Mr. Ekwang. Thank you so much. Thank you. Our time is fast spent, but before we go, Mr. Ayogo, very quickly in 30 seconds, so that we can also have the closing views of Mr. Adewale. What in 30 seconds, what would be your recommendation at this point in time?
Well, quickly, we need to call an emergency. We need to declare a state of emergency in our security architecture. Security is a collective responsibility. I've seen where the National Assembly has called severally that we need to overhaul our service chiefs. But beyond that, we need to really, restructure our security architecture, because the state governors, most of them, in the guise of not performing, they will say that they are not, even though they are chief security officer, they cannot even have any, they don't have any say. Even with the civil defense, they cannot even control the commissioner of police. They cannot even direct the commissioner of police. So we need to engage
all the money
community
they spend
policing
on security, in providing
all the logistics,
how can they not have control?
That is the big question. So, but fundamentally, what we need to do is to engage with the local, what we call community policing, information gathering. That is very fundamental to our security.
All right,
challenges.
Mr. Adewale, let's have your final thoughts here, very quickly.
Okay, my final thought here is that it is important that the government and everybody in charge of education start to take the life of our children very seriously. We have to stop playing this politics of hanky-panky with our students, with our schools, and all that has to do with our nation and our children. Yes, the Ministry of Education is solely responsible for the children in schools, but the Ministry of Education is not the security architect, because, like I said, there is a forum where all of them work together as stakeholders, where everybody, even the military and the police, ought to have done their work right. If this work was done right, and the communities were even brought in close contact to train them on even how to detect those who are fake security men, it would have been easier for them to even gather more intelligence to save these children from this mayhem that we are experiencing now. So government at all levels should put their hands at the house on ground and ensure that schools are safe and our children are in safe hands.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Damian Mary Adeleke Adewale is a programs officer, Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All, SAKEFA. We're also joined by Dr. Ferdinand Ikwang. Dr. Ikwang is a security specialist. We were also joined by Kabiru Adamu. Mr. Kabiru Adamu is a security consultant. Thank you so much for your time. And here in the studio, Mr. Leonard Ayogo is a public affairs analyst and a member of the Chatham House. Thank you so much for your time. Gentlemen, thank you for your contributions. We hope and pray that the security agencies will move as fast as they have promised and rescue these children, these hapless children, who, for no fault of theirs, now find themselves in the arms of criminals and bandits in an unfamiliar terrain in forests and bushes in Katsina State. Our hope is that this story will not be the same as that of the Chibok girls, and that it will also not be the same as that of the DAPCHI girls. We did plead with those who have done this to please return these innocent children to their families. My name is Imoni Amarere. Do have yourself a wonderful time for the rest of the week. See you on Friday. Bye for now.